Hey there, my friends. It's the first week of April 2026 already, and that means it's time for the monthly Cape Coral real estate market update. If you're not familiar, if you haven't been here before for these, this is a longer form video. I'm really going to dive deep into the statistics and the facts and the figures of the Cape Coral real estate market. We're mostly going to be focusing on the numbers that were put up this last month that just came out. So we're talking about March 2026's numbers. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the entire market, and then we're going to really break things down into some different important categories. We'll talk about non-waterfront single-family homes. Of course, we'll talk about the all-important Gulf access homes that we have here in the city of Cape Coral, and those homes are really taking off. It's on fire right now for Gulf access homes. But then we're also going to finish up with the numbers on the condo market here in the city of Cape Coral. And I'm going to finish this entire video up by giving you some advice if maybe you're a current buyer or maybe you're a buyer in the near future for the city of Cape Coral, as well as some advice if you are either a current seller or you're thinking about selling your property here in the city of Cape Coral in the near future. That's some important information for you right there that I'm going to cover. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a longtime resident of Cape Coral in Southwest Florida. I live here in the Northwest Cape with my wife and our 3 little kids, and I've been a full-time real estate broker here in the city of Cape Coral for 20 years now. I do one of these videos every single month where we really dive deep into the Cape Coral real estate market numbers, but these are in addition to the weekly videos that I put out where I'm just giving you some really good, useful information. Sometimes we're looking at some fun real estate, and other times we're covering some really important topics like flood insurance or utility assessments, taxes, things like that. So if you are interested in the city of Cape Coral, or really anywhere in Southwest Florida, if you're moving to Cape Coral or moving to Fort Myers or something, I want to invite you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can be around for these videos every single week. I promise that you'll get a lot out of these. And by the way, if you are in the real estate market, buying or selling anything, I do these to meet folks just like you. So I would love it if you give me a call, text, email me, whatever it takes. My number is, of course, right there on the screen, so you can reach out to me anytime. And I always enjoy hearing from folks that watch this channel. So thank you so much for being here. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the monthly Cape Coral real estate market update. I always start these off, as you may well know, by just showing you the lowest and the highest sales of this past month. So again, we're talking about March 2026. We'll get into the lowest and the highest sales in a few different categories. Let's check those out. All right, so let's start off with the lowest sales in the entire city of Cape Coral for the entire month of March 2026. I'm going to give you a few different categories, and we'll start off with the lowest overall sale. And we're really going to be talking mostly about residential properties in this report. So it covers things like single family homes, condos, on water, off water, things like that. We're not going to be talking about vacant lots in this one. I just ran out of time on this month, so we'll cover that next month for sure. So we're mostly going to be talking about residential properties. But let's start off with the lowest condo that sold in the city of Cape Coral for the month of March 2026. That's this one right here in the Southeast Cape, 4906 Victoria Drive, Unit 107. That's in the southeast section of Cape Coral. It's in what I would consider to be the Yacht Club neighborhood down there. It's right off of Coronado, just south of Cape Coral Parkway. It's in a nice Gulf access neighborhood, but this particular condo complex is not on the water there. And this unit was listed for $75,000. It was on the market for 217 days before it finally sold in the middle of March for $65,000. You know, there's been only a handful of condos get under that $100,000 mark for the last few months, and I don't recall in any recent history seeing one get this far down. $65,000 was this one, and this was a nice unit for all intents and purposes. It looked like a nice complex over there. It was built in 1974, as most of those condos over there are pretty old. Just under 1,000 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, but it was remodeled. These buildings right there, the ground floor of these condos would have been flooded during Hurricane Ian, because a lot of the older properties around that area did get some flood water during that storm in 2022. And this was also a 55 and older, so it was an age-restricted community. We often see these 55 and older condo complexes. They usually have a little bit lower sales just because there's some restrictions on who can go ahead and buy in those communities. But overall, this was a really nice unit, and somebody got a really great deal at this at $65,000. Closed on the 16th of March, all cash, $65,000. 4906 Victoria Drive, Unit 107 was the lowest condo sale of the month. All right, let's jump over to the lowest single-family home that sold this past month. And recently, we've only seen a handful of these single-family homes dip below that $200,000 mark. But this one got pretty far under that $100,000 mark this particular month. So check this out, 1807 Southwest 2nd Avenue. That's in the southwest section of Cape Coral, just west of Santa Barbara Boulevard, right there off of Trafalgar. And this home went on the market at $149,900. It was only on market for 3 days before it finally sold for $145,000, and that was an all-cash sale as well. 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so a little bit smaller home, just over 1,100 square feet of living area inside, built in 1980. And this one was pretty beat up. It was pretty beat up, a little dirty inside, definitely needed some work. But it was a concrete block home, so sometimes we see some wood frame homes get under that $200,000 mark, but this one was a concrete block home, so it just needed a bunch of work in there, and it's no surprise. I mean, you get under $150,000, despite the poor condition, that thing inevitably is going to sell pretty quickly, and that's why it only lasted 3 days. But nevertheless, a pretty good deal. This isn't in the flood zone, so it's a good area over there in the southwest. It's got central utilities in and all of that. Just needed quite a bit of work. Had a roof that was from 2018, so that wasn't too old. Just needed to pretty much be remodeled inside of there, and maybe a few things on the outside. So congrats to the buyers and the sellers. $145,000 was the lowest single-family home sale. I should mention there was one other single-family home that sold for $90,000. That one had fire damage and tornado damage. I was actually in that property, and in my opinion, we had an engineer look at it, and I don't think that property could be even salvaged. So they were basically buying lot value for that property. So I didn't want to include that one with this one. This one's reasonably move-in ready, just needed a lot of work on the inside. So $145,000 for all intents and purposes, with the lowest single-family home sale of the month of March 2026 for the whole city. All right, let's do a fun one. The lowest Gulf Access home sale of the entire month. Very rarely do we see these Gulf Access homes get under the $400,000 mark. That's sort of the benchmark for these properties. But this one did, and it got a fair amount under that $400,000. And you may recognize this property if you've watched this channel. 1503 Southeast 23rd Terrace. It's in a great location there, just north of Veterans, right to the west of Del Prado Boulevard. This thing's been on the market for a while, and I covered it in at least one of the videos that I've done maybe a few months ago for these dirt cheap Gulf Access homes. This needed a ton of work. It was actually a foreclosure. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, just over 1,700 square feet of living area. They started out at $425,000, and it was on the market for 308 days. They kept reducing that, reducing. Finally, they got it to $355,000, and it sold at $320,000, and I bet you that was a cash sale. Yep, absolutely. Cash sale. So, this one needed a brand new roof. It needed just about everything. It really needed a lot of work on the pool. It was a pool home on a Gulf Access canal. It's probably only about 20 or 30 minutes away from open water, not in the flood zone, which is a big deal for a Gulf Access home. Looked like it maybe some previous residents smoked inside, so it definitely needed some new paint, probably a bunch of new flooring, new kitchens and baths. So it needed just about everything you can put in a house like this, but still $320,000. Like I say, they rarely get under $400,000, and this one even had a pool, even though it needed a lot of work. So absolutely, by all means, congrats to the buyers on this pickup of this foreclosure property at $320,000. $320,000 was by far the lowest Gulf Access home that sold last month. I think there was one other that was in the upper 300s, and the rest of them were north of $400,000. So congrats to the buyers on that one. They got their work cut out for them, but that's a pretty good pickup at $320,000. And I think it's about to storm on me, but let's go ahead and get over to the highest sales of the month of March for the entire city of Cape Coral. All right, the highest sales of the month of March 2026 for the entire city of Cape Coral. The weather's been beautiful today. It's just been a little bit windy, and the daily rains are starting up, so we're definitely getting into a little bit further towards the summer where it rains for 30 minutes or so every day in the afternoon, and that looks like it's about to happen on me. So let's get through these highest sales of the month before it starts raining. We'll start off with the highest condo sale last month. Several of the last months, the highest condo sale has been in Tarpon Point, that beautiful high-rise community over there in the southwest section of Cape Coral. These are beautiful units. They're really, really large condos as well. And this one right here, 6021 Silver King Boulevard, Unit 305, was the highest open market sale. There was actually a unit in here that sold off market this past month for $1.1 million. This one's on the 3rd floor, so some of these lower floor units don't sell quite that high. But this one was listed for $949,000. It was on the market for 132 days and sold for $875,000. This is just a beautiful unit. Like I said, it's on the 3rd floor. It's still got some really, really great views across the waterfront and the marina down there. But like I said, these condos are huge. 2,970 square foot condo, 3 bedrooms plus an office, 3.5 baths. These units were built in 2007. And this one looked to be pretty nicely remodeled. It looked like it had some new flooring in it, new kitchen, new baths. They have great amenities in Tarpon Point area, and that's kind of what draws people over there to it. But the fees are also really high. They're almost $1,000 a month for HOA fees in Tarpon Point there. But these units come with 2-car garages, which is really nice. And of course, this one all had impact windows and doors and everything like that. So just a really, really solid unit there. Again, listed $949 and sold for $875,000 right there in the middle of March, and that was an all-cash sale as well. And like I said, there was an off-market one of these on one of the higher floors that did transfer last month for $1.1 million. So that's technically the highest condo sale last month, but I didn't have any pictures of that one. I thought it'd be a little bit more fun to see something that had the pictures. But congrats to the buyers and the sellers. Again, 6021 Silver King Boulevard, 305 there in Tarpon Point was the highest condo sale of the month of March for the entire city of Cape Coral. All right, before we get into the absolute highest one, I always like, the highest one, the highest sale of the month, almost universally is always a golf access home. Just those property values are obviously a little bit higher. So I wanted to show you what the highest non-golf access home sold for this past month. And this one is a little bit close to home. We're up here in the Northwest Cape, 3080 Freedom Acres West in Cape Coral. That's in the absolute extreme area of the Northwest. Probably most of the people, even if you are familiar with the city, you don't even know this little community exists up there. It's a little enclave of acreage properties up there. And this one was on almost 2.5 acres, 2.4 acres, 3080 Freedom Acres West. Was listed at $1.499 on the market for 80 days and sold for $1.35 million. And that was conventional financing. And kudos to my very good friend and colleague, Dusty Gardner, who sold this one. Was real proud of him for doing that. That was a great sale over there. And he's an absolutely fantastic realtor. I've known him for 20 years, and he did a great job with this one. But this house, it was basically new construction. It was built in 2021, so it wasn't brand new. But a huge house on that 2.4 acres, 4,186 square feet of living area, 5 bedrooms plus an office, 4.5 baths, again, built in 2021. Had all impact windows and doors in there, super clean, modern, really nice open layout. And surprisingly enough, it did not have a pool, though. This house, in spite of selling for $1.35 million, did not have a pool. It had some great outdoor spaces, and certainly there's room to put one in there. But this was just a really, really beautiful custom-built 2021 large house on 2.4 acres, which is very, very rare for the city of Cape Coral. Our average lot size is 1/4 of an acre, so you're talking something significantly larger than that up there in the Northwest. So congrats to the buyers, and congrats to the sellers, and congrats to my friend Dusty on this sale. This was the highest non-golf access home sale of the entire month of March for the city of Cape Coral. All right. Let's jump over to the fun one. That's the highest golf access home sale, which means it's the highest overall sale of this past month. We actually had 6 sales get over $2 million last month. 6 sales over $2 million in the city of Cape Coral in just 1 month. It's really the time of year where we see some of these higher end sales occur, so it's not surprising. But this was by far the highest one. 116 Southwest 59th Terrace. This is it's in the Southwest Cape, but it's really close to the Yacht Club neighborhood right there. It's basically riverfront, although it's kind of a protected little cove right there that points out towards the river, right there off of Piney Point in the Southwest Cape. And this one was listed for $3.5 million. I don't have a bunch of pictures on it because it sold in 12 days before they put any meaningful pictures on there. It was a brand new construction, custom furnished home that was finished this year, never been lived in, just over 3,500 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 4 and 2 half baths, so 6 bathrooms. And like I said, it only lasted 12 days on the market before it finally sold there in the middle of March for $3.45 million, and that was an all-cash sale as well. So in spite of there not being any pictures there, you can probably use your imagination and figure out that this was a really, really beautiful custom-built luxury home there, basically on the riverfront in Piney Point. Apparently had a nice butler's kitchen, custom fireplace, of course all impact windows and doors, or big resort-style pool, and a dock that could fit 4 different boats. So I'm sure this was a really incredible place. But this was the only one that got up over $3 million. But again, we had 6 of these that got over $2 million this past month. So by all means, congrats to the buyers and the sellers. $3.45 million was the highest overall sale of the month of March for the city of Cape Coral for 2026. So that wraps it up for the highest sales of the month. So now let's start to dive into the statistics portion of this report. I always start off with just the overall view of the entire market, the residential real estate market here in the city of Cape Coral. So let's cover some of those numbers, and then we'll really start to break these down into some different categories. Let's get into it. All right, so we're going to start off with the entire overview of the real estate market in the city of Cape Coral. So obviously we're talking about residential properties, so these numbers that you're about to see don't include commercial, they don't include vacant land. It's basically everything that's a single-family home, a townhome, a condo, all of that stuff, basically anything that you can live in. But here are the total number of sales. This graph goes back to January 2024. This is the total number of monthly sales. Had a big spike this past month, as expected in the month of March. 594 residential sales in the city of Cape Coral this past month. That's up from February's number of 473. So we had a really big spike from February to March, and 594 is a pretty healthy number. We had 600 even last March in 2025, 611 in March of 2024. But overall, as a real estate market, we're pretty up right now. If you take the first 3 months into consideration and look at those first 3 months this year compared to the last couple of years, the first 3 months this year so far, we've sold 1,412 residential properties. Last year, in the first 3 months, we'd only sold 1,277. So we're up about 135 ahead of the pace of last year. That represents, if you want to look at it like demand, that represents a 10.6% increase in the overall demand this year, the first 3 months of this year compared to the first 3 months of last year. And 2024, we still beat those numbers as well. First 3 months of 2024, 1,353 sales that year. So we're ahead of the last 2 years, which is a really positive sign. I think the real estate market's looking healthier and healthier, and we're putting up some good numbers. But let's take a look at the pricing for those 594 sales. Here's the median price chart, again going back to January 2024, so a little bit over 2 years. The monthly median price for all of the city of Cape Coral, the entire real estate market. Our median price last month was $353,250, and that's down. We had kind of a spike in February for whatever reason. It went to $375 in February, and then came back down to pretty much where it ought to be right now, $353,250. But if you want to look at this over the course of the last 2 years, March of last year, March 2025, the median price that month was $370,000. So we're down about $16,750 from where we were last year in terms of median price. That represents a reduction or a correction of about 4.5%. So the average property is about 4.5% less now than it was 12 months ago. And if you, of course, look back 2 years ago when we were in still a little bit stronger real estate market, the median price back then in March of 2024 was $390,000. So we're down $36,750 off of that point. Represents a reduction of pricing of about 9.4%. I will say the last 6 or so months, it's kind of fluctuated up and down, but it's remained relatively level the last 6 or 7 months. We haven't really seen any meaningful trend in either direction right now. And I think as we get into the later segments of this report, you're going to find out that it really seems like this particular real estate market cycle is making a very slow turnaround. And of course, pricing is always the last thing that kind of make its turnaround, but all signs are pointing to this particular market cycle kind of finishing out, and hopefully we'll be on the upswing before too long. But if you just want to talk about our overall correction since the absolute peak of the real estate market, the peak The peak median price, it was back in April of 2022, where the total median price in the city of Cape Coral peaked out at $439,000. So if you take that number and compare it to this past month's median price, that's an overall correction of about $85,750, or a 19.5% price correction just since April of 2022. And that doesn't even take into consideration some high inflation years that we've had. Traditionally real estate always has kept up with inflation, or at least stayed a little bit ahead of inflation. And you factor things like that in. We've had a few years there where it might have been 5-6% of inflation during some of those years since 2022. Now you're looking at a correction that's been a little bit more significant, maybe 35% or so. So I think it's pretty telling. And like I said, over the last 6 or 7 months, it's been pretty flat. Even going back to last summer, we haven't really seen any further reduction in these median prices. They've kind of ticked up and down a little bit. They've remained pretty steady around that $360,000 mark. So it looks, for all intents and purposes, like we're making this very slow turnaround here. But let's look at the inventory, because what was driving those prices down over the course of the last 2 years was really the inventory issue that we had. We had way too many properties on the market, particularly last year. And so this graph I'm about to show you shows the monthly number of active listings that were on the market at some point during the month. So this doesn't mean there were this many actives on the market at any one time. It just means during the entire month there were this many actives on at one point or another. Some of them sold, some of them expired, some of them were taken off the market. So just keep that in mind right now. But here's the inventory sheet going back to January 2024. We had 3,920 properties available at some point during the month of March 2026. And that's down from February. February was 3,954. As you can see on this chart, we always get kind of a seasonal bump as we get into really November, December, and January. Just because we're a very seasonal real estate market here. We sell a lot more properties in the first and second quarter of the year, so more people usually put their properties on. In any type of market cycle, we usually see the inventory tick up a little bit in the first few months of the year. Didn't really happen as it wasn't as pronounced this year as it was certainly last year and even the year before that. So we didn't see this huge big spike that we saw in 2025, and I think that's pretty telling, because 3,920 properties on the market at some point during March of 2026. In March of 2025, we had 4,907. So we've taken 987 properties off the market, or 20.1%. We've had a reduction in inventory of 20.1% just in the last 12 months. And even if you look back in 2024, at March of 2024, the number was 4,264. So we're still down a little bit over 8% from where we were 2 years ago. And really, we weren't talking about having such an extreme inventory problem that early on in 2024. So we've seen it kind of come down in the later months of 2024 and then really spike up, and it hit fresh highs there in the spring of 2025. And then we've taken a significant amount of inventory off the market since spring of last year. Again, 20.1% just in the last 12 months. And this chart, the low point on this chart was just this past December, where it hit 35.36. And considering we didn't really get that big of a bump, we're talking about less than 400 more properties on the market now than there was at the low point there in December. I fully expect we'll start to see that inventory continue to tick down. We're selling a lot of properties. Some of the unrealistic sellers are pulling their properties off the market, and we're also going to be getting into the slower summer months as we get into the end of this second quarter and start the third quarter. And properties always naturally come off the market anyway. So I fully expect we're going to see some fresh lows on this chart as we get into the early to mid-summer. And we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But this is one of the reasons why I say, all signs point to this particular real estate market cycle kind of bottoming out. And it looks like we're kind of turning the corner here. And like I said, the inventory is one of the first things that you see go down and change directions, and then pricing follows up the rear. So we'll inevitably see pricing start to go back up at some point. But we're going to see these inventory numbers go down further before that starts to happen. So that pretty much wraps it up for the overall Cape Coral real estate market, the total stats on it. And so now let's kind of break things down into some different categories. And I always start off with the biggest category that we have here in the city of Cape Coral, which is non-waterfront single-family homes. So these are single family homes that are not on any type of body of water. They're not on a Gulf access canal. They're not on a freshwater canal or a lake or anything like that. Just strictly off-water single family homes. So let's get into those. All right, off-water single-family homes. Again, these are just homes that aren't on any waterfront. They're not on the Gulf Access Canal. They're not on a freshwater canal. They're not on a lake. Just regular old non-waterfront single-family homes. They make up by far the majority of the sales that we see every month. So we had 593, 594 total residential sales last month. Of those, 339 were off-water single-family homes. And we had a pretty healthy month for non-waterfront single-family homes. So let's take a look at this graph of the monthly total number of sales. You can see here, again, 339 was the number that we put up this past month, which is March 2026. That's up significantly from February's number of 271. But you know what? We're a little bit off pace of where we've been at this point in the year, at least compared to the last couple of years. The last March was the highest month that we had for this category in terms of the number of sales. So March of 2025, we peaked out at 374 sales that month. And go back to March of 2024, there was even more than that, 384. So we're a little bit off that pace. And again, if you just look at the first 3 months of the year and you want to look at this as demand, and in other words, consumption of properties, how many properties we're selling. First 3 months of this year, we've sold 789 properties. The first 3 months of 2025, 803 we had put up at that point. So we're about 14 off the mark of where we were last year by this time. It represents a reduction in demand, if you want to look at it like that, of 1.7%. So not terribly significant, but definitely noteworthy. We haven't sold quite as many properties as we did last year, and 2024 was an even better year for this particular category. The first 3 months of 2024, we had sold 849. So we're a fair amount off of that pace for the last 2 years, at least in these first 3 months. We may get to do a little bit better as we get into the second quarter. A lot of this really depends on, you can imagine the off-water single-family homes. Most of the buyers are going to be financed buyers. So the monthly number of sales is greatly affected by, where the particular mortgage rates are at any given time and any given month. So we may get some relief on the mortgage rates and might see a few more sales here in the upcoming months. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. But it's been a little bit harder to sell these lower priced off-water single-family homes in recent months. And let's take a look at the median price, because the median price has certainly come down in the last 2 years, but we've had kind of a wonky few months with the median price on this category. Again, this is the graph going back to January 2024. Median price for the month of March 2026, $330,000. That's dipped slightly again. February of this year, we had kind of a bit of a spike. It went up to 345, and now it's back down to 330. But again, overall, I would say, 330 is a little bit on the low side, but this kind of bounces up and down a little bit from month to month. So we really need to take into consideration the last 6 or 7 months. And I think we've been fairly flat for the last 6 or 7 months. In this category, as well as a lot of the other ones. But if you want to take it back 12 months to March of 2025, the median price for this category was $347,700. So we're down about 5.1% off of where we were 12 months ago. It represents about a $17,700 reduction in overall prices. And if you want to take it back 2 years ago, when the market was doing a little bit better, this particular category, March of 2024, the median price was $370,000. So we're down $40,000 off of where that mark was 2 years ago. It represents a reduction of prices of about 10.8%, so almost 11%. The prices have come down since 2 years ago. If you want to look at, of course, these include pool homes and non-pool homes, but if you just want to break it down into homes that have pools that are not on the water and homes that don't have pools that are on the water, pretty significant difference, as you can probably imagine, and it's a little bit more this month than it has been, let's say, a year ago. That spread for a while has been around that $100,000 mark, but in some months we've taken it down a little bit under $100,000. But this month it was pretty high. So the median pool home for these homes that sold this past month, non-waterfront, $417,500. And the homes that did not have pools, the median price for those this past month that were not on the water, hit $305,000. So we're talking, what is that? $112,000, $113,000 difference between the average non-pool home and the average pool home right now. And I always tell folks, when you see differences like that, if you're looking to do something to your property to improve the value of it, oftentimes you can add a pool, maybe add a pool for $80,000. If you can get another $110,000 out of that property once you put a pool in, then it makes sense to spend $80,000 on it. So something to think about. But yeah, pool homes $417,500, non-pool homes $305,000, but the total median for off-water properties, off-water single-family homes, was $330,000 this past month. Let's look at the inventory. Inventory has been kind of slowly increasing the last few months. Take a look at this graph going back to January 2024. So the total number of active listings that we had on the market at some point in March for this category was 2,133. That's up just very slightly from February's number of 2,123. But once again, we've made significant progress over the last 12 months. You take it back 12 months ago, March of 2025, and the inventory number was 2,637. So we've taken 504 of these properties off the market in the last 12 months. A net of 504 represents a decrease in inventory of about 19.1%. And even if you look at 2 years ago, March 2024, the number was 2,384. So we're still down 251, or about 10.5%. from where we were this time 2 years ago, 24 months ago. So we've made significant progress on the inventory front. It looks like it's stagnated here in the last few months, but the good thing is we don't see it going up tremendously like it did last year. It's just, if anything, kind of ticked up a little bit in the last few months, and I fully expect as we get into the later spring months and early summer, this inventory number will continue to drop down like it will be in the rest of the categories. But that wraps things up for off-water single-family homes. So let's jump over to everybody's favorite category, and that's Gulf access homes. Homes that are on a body of salt water, usually a Gulf access saltwater canal with access out to the open Gulf. So let's get into those. Okay, I know a lot of you out there love the Gulf access homes, so let's get into Gulf access single-family homes. And what do I mean by Gulf access? If you're not familiar with, the city of Cape Coral is more well-known for their waterfront real estate than probably anywhere else in Florida. We've got well over 400 miles of canals where you can have your home, you can have a boat behind it. Most of those 400 miles of canals are Gulf access, meaning you can have your boat behind your house, you get all the way out to the open Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, whatever you want to call that body of water out there. But it's a very, very big part of our real estate market down here, and that's really what drives a lot of the folks that are moving from out of the area, because we just have really the best bang for your buck for this type of waterfront real estate anywhere in the state of Florida. I truly believe that. But let's talk about these Gulf access single-family homes. We've had a couple of really, really strong months for Gulf access. Gulf access as a category, these homes generally sell. We sell a lot more of these in the first and second quarter of the year than we do in the third and fourth quarter. That's just simply because a lot of the folks that are buying these properties are maybe seasonal residents, they're retirees, they're folks that are coming down here for the winter and the spring, and then maybe going back up north to their primary home in the other months of the year in the summer. So we sell significantly more of these Gulf access homes in the first and second quarter of the year, and we've had 2 really strong months. Here's the graph for the total number of monthly sales going back to January 2024. We sold 100 Gulf access homes last month in the month of March, and that's just down very slightly from February's number. And we had a really good February, 102 Gulf access homes sold in February. But if you want to compare the pace that we're at right now to the last couple of years, I mean, last March, we had a really healthy March 2025 as well, but we sold 97. So we sold 3 fewer last year in the month of March, 98, so 2 fewer in the month of March for 2024. But let's look at the overall trends that we're seeing, at least in the first 3 months of the year so far. In the first 3 months of 2026, we've sold 273 Gulf access homes in the city of Cape Coral. Last year, in the first 3 months, we'd only sold 195. So we are up 78. If you want to look at it like demand, our demand, we've sold 78 more properties in the first 3 months of this year than we did last year. That represents a demand increase of about 40%. 40% higher pace this year in the first 3 months than we did last year in the first 3 months. That's why I said at the beginning of this report that, Gulf access is on fire right now. The inventory, as you'll see in a minute, has been coming down, and I fully expect we'll have a couple more really strong months of Gulf access, but I thought that was really noteworthy. We're up 40%. Our pace of sales for Gulf access homes is up 40% from what it was last year. And even 2024, we had sold in the first 3 months 232. So we're still up 41 off of where we were. It's still 20-some percent, I think. But let's look at the median price, because the median price is a little wonky for this when you're talking about a sample size that only has 60 or maybe at the most 100, 110 properties in any given month. As you can imagine, the median price will bounce up and down quite a bit from month to month. But let's look at this chart. Here's the monthly median price for Gulf access homes going back to January 2024. Median price this past month in March was $772,500. That's up from February's number of $724,000. If you want to take it back 12 months, March of 2025, that was $750,000. So our median price this past month was actually higher than it was in March of 2025. And back in March of 2024, that number was $777,500. But like I said, you got to kind of read between the lines because we don't have a big monthly sample size. So it's almost better to kind of look at the years as a whole. And if you take it back to where this particular market peaked out, which was spring of 2022, if you look at the yearly median for all of the homes that sold that year, the median right in the middle, 2022, the median price got all the way up to $825,000. And so far this month, or at the end of 2025, the yearly median for 2025 was $700,000. So you're talking from 2022 to 2025, the yearly median price for Gulf access homes went down $125,000, or about 15.2%. But so far in the first 3 months, if you take all of the sales for Gulf access homes that have happened in the first 3 months of this year, that median price is $736,000. So we're $36,000 above where 2025's entire median price was. Now that could be just something because we're selling a few more expensive homes here in the first 3 months because it's the busy time of year for this. So we really, I don't want to read too much into that just yet. We're going to need to get into later months of the year and see where we're at, because I think that median price will probably come down as we get into the later months of the year and we get a few more of these sales under our belt. Just because, again, we tend to sell a little bit more expensive properties in those first 6 months of the year versus the second 6. So the second 6 will usually pull that yearly median price down a little bit. But I think it's remarkable. I mean, we're still down off of that peak, that April or yearly median price peak in 2022 of 825. I mean, even at 736, we're still almost 11% off of where we were back there at the peak. So we've corrected quite a bit. And again, that doesn't include the inflation numbers. We've had a few years with really high inflation, and real estate generally keeps up well or even outpaces the inflation numbers. So if you take into consideration that maybe we've got 15% of inflation over the last few years and add that on top of that 10.8% at 11%, now you're talking a correction that maybe looks like 25%, the actual correction. So we've corrected significantly more than I think people realize. And that's one of the reasons I feel like this particular market cycle is turning around, especially for Gulf access homes, because we're selling a lot and the inventory has been coming down. Take a look at this inventory graph right here. Again, these are the monthly number of active listings on the market at any given point during these months. Inventory ticked down slightly in March compared to February. We had 790 available Gulf access properties on the market at some point during March. That's down from 797 in February. But again, you look at this graph and you don't see the big spike that we saw last year when we came out of the end of 2024 into 2025. This inventory numbers really spiked up very dramatically, and we haven't seen that at all. It barely blipped up this particular season. And that's one of the indications where I think we're going to continue to see the inventory numbers kind of dip down further, because if you look back at March of 2025, we had 1,088 of these properties on the market back then. So we've taken 298 net properties off the market since then. Represents a reduction of inventory of almost 27.5% just in the last 12 months. And even if you take it back to March of 2024, that number was 895. So in the 2 year grand scheme of things, we're still down 105 properties, or about 11.7%. So significant progress has been made on the Gulf access. We're selling a lot of them right now. The inventory, as you may well know if you've been kind of checking the properties that are available for Gulf access homes in the city of Cape Coral, you're not finding nearly as many as you were 6-8 months ago. And I think that entirely has to do with the fact that a lot of these properties that we're going to sell have already sold, and the ones that are still out there, they're still selling fairly quickly. Even the properties that, as long as they're priced right, these properties, especially Gulf Access during this time of the year, they still sell pretty quickly. You know, it's been the last few months I've seen several properties get under multiple offer situations after they went on the market. You know, on the market a day or two, and all of a sudden you got multiple offers on it. So decent properties at decent prices are still selling very, very fast in the Gulf Access category. But that pretty much wraps up the numbers for the Gulf Access real estate market for the city of Cape Coral for March 2026. So let's go ahead and finish up by looking at the condo market for this past month. All right, condos and townhomes. Condos and townhomes is not a very big category. It's the smallest category of residential real estate that we have in the city of Cape Coral. There's not usually that many sales in any given month. So I just combine it all. So these are condos, townhomes, carriage homes, anything like that, basically. Anything that's not a single family home and it's not multifamily or anything like that combined together is what I'm including with these numbers. And, you know, condos, very much like Gulf Access homes, are very strongest in this time of the year. The first and second quarter of the year are the strongest by far for condo sales. Again, because most of the people that are buying these condos, they're maybe seasonal folks, maybe people that are retirees that like to stay here only during the winter. So when they're down here, they're purchasing their condos, and we don't see as many sales in the summer and fall months as we do in the first and second quarter of the year. So let's take a look at the number of condo sales this past month. Here's the chart going back to January 2024. Big spike in condo sales this past month. 72 condos sold in March 2026. That's up from February's number of 51. And we're just trouncing last year's number. 2025 was kind of a rough year for condos, to be honest with you. And last year, the highest month in terms of the monthly number of sales was March of 2025, and we only sold 58. So we're up significantly this March from last March, and even March of 2024, that was the highest month that year at 73. So they only beat us by 1 in 2024. But, you know, again, you got to take into consideration the first 3 months and look at where we're at as an entire condo market right now in the first 3 months versus the first 3 months of 2025 and 2024. And the first 3 months of this year, we've sold 167 condos. First 3 months of 2025, we only sold 131. So we're up 36, or about 27.5%. So keep in mind, if you want to look at that like demand, so our condo demand is up 27.5% now than it was 12 months ago. And just like Gulf Access that we just covered, they're up 40%. So the off-water single-family homes are lagging behind a little bit, but interestingly enough, these properties that are a little more appealing to the retirees and the seasonal residents and things like that, like the condos and the Gulf Access homes, up significantly in terms of the pace at which we are selling these properties this year compared to the first 3 months of last year. So it's 27.5% is something to take note of in terms of the condo demand. But let's look at the median price, because very much like Gulf Access, we don't have a big sample size here, so the median price is going to move up and down quite a bit from month to month. But let's look at the monthly chart here going back January 2024. Median price for condos and townhomes last month in the city of Cape Coral, $212,500. That's down very slightly from February's number of $215,000. But again, you got to kind of read between the lines a little bit. If we just take it back 12 months, the March 2025 median price for condos was $222,500. So we're only down about 10 grand off where we were last year. It's only about 4.5%. If you look back 2 years ago, in 2024 in March, $250,000 was the median price back then. So we're down 15%, or about $37,500 from that number. But again, you kind of have to average these out a little bit because it does bounce up and down. You can see the overall trend. We went down, and it looks like, for all intents and purposes, we've probably flattened off in the last 6 or 7, 8 months or so. But if you take the years as a whole, interestingly enough, condos, the prices peaked out in 2023 for condos for this real estate market. Single-family homes, on-water, off-water, those all peaked out in spring of 2022. But condos, we hit our high price mark in the following spring, in 2023, spring of 2023. So interestingly enough, the total yearly median price for condos in 2022 was $277,500. Then it bumped up in 2023 to $280,000. and then started to come down. 2024, the median price that whole year was $262,500. Then in last year, it went $225,000. And in the first 3 months of this year, so far, our median total price is $207,000. So if you look at the peak, where this market peaked out in 2023, compare that to now, the average condo price is down $73,000, or about 26.1%. And again, that doesn't even include the inflation figures. Condos by far have taken it on the chin worse than any other category in this real estate market. A lot of that has to do with the fees. A lot of that has to do with the folks that are buying or owning condos. A lot of those are on fixed incomes. And when you stack on a couple extra $200-300 a month in these HOA fees, because insurance and things like that, maintenance have gone up, and it really since 2020, but definitely since the hurricanes that we've had, you can see why it's kind of priced some people out, and some people have had to sell. They're a little bit more forced sellers, so they've been forced to reduce their prices farther to get those condos sold, because our demand last year particularly wasn't particularly healthy. This year so far it has been fairly healthy, and I think that's completely because the condo sellers have finally got it through their heads that, hey, we need to get really aggressive on these prices to move these condos, and that's what's happening, and that's why you've seen that median price go down 26.1% since 2023, just in the last really 3 years. So I think that's been a big story, and I think condos, they might be lagging behind some of the other categories in terms of making that turnaround. We've got some more work to do on the inventory front. Let's take a look at that. Here's the inventory graph going back again, 2024, January 2024. Total number of active listings on the market at any given point. We made some progress compared to February. It looks like we peaked out in February, and now we're at 495 condos on the market, condos and townhomes. Again, down from February's number of 519. And this was a little more pronounced. We saw a little bit bigger of a spike this year compared to some of the other categories, but certainly nowhere near what we saw condos do last year. Last year, when we got into really November and December, and then certainly into January, February, the number of condos available on the market really spiked up significantly. And but we have made some progress. In March of last year, the condo inventory peaked out at 581. So we've taken 86 net condos off the market in the last 12 months. That means a reduction of inventory of about 14.8% just in the last 12 months. And if you take it back 2 years ago, 512 condos on the market in March of 2024. So we're down 17, and net 17 are about 3.3%. So we're still underneath where we were 2 years ago. But again, condos, they've just been a little more sluggish. We had a little more sluggish 2025, so we didn't get as much of that inventory off the market last year as we did in some of the other categories. And but luckily, we didn't get a huge spike, but we did get a bigger spike in this category than we did in some of the other categories from that December to January mark. And I fully expect we'll continue to see the inventory decline. It'll just do so at a slower pace versus some of these other categories. But that wraps things up for condos and townhomes. That wraps up the statistical portion of this real estate market report. Now we're going to get into some advice if you're maybe a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice if you're a seller in the Cape Coral real estate market. Let's get into that. Okay, so if you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market as it sits right now in April 2026, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to? What kind of tips can I give you right now? Well, based on everything that I'm seeing in this real estate market, we are turning the corner in this particular real estate market cycle. It's been a cycle that's lasted a fairly long time in terms of average real estate cycle time periods. We kind of peaked out right around spring of 2022, and we've really been kind of correcting ever since then. So basically 4 years. We've been in more of a buyer's market, especially we had a couple of hurricanes that went through there in 2022 and 2024, and certainly that didn't help things out. But nevertheless, for all intents and purposes, it looks like this particular market cycle is making a turnaround. If you've been shopping for Cape Coral real estate for a while, you've probably noticed that you're not seeing as many options out there on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever system that you're using. And that's specifically because inventory, depending on the category, has come down roughly 30% in the last 12 months. And in spite of the seasonal bump that we always get as we get into December and January, we didn't really see much of that at all. It was very, very muted this year, which really tells me that we're about to see that inventory kind of go down even further as we get into the summer months and we finish up a really strong buying season. So demand is up, inventory is down. the market, economic laws really tell you what's going to happen in those situations. At a certain point, those prices are going to start to come back up, and I think that's going to happen sooner than later. If you asked me 12 months ago if we were going to be in this position that we're in right now, as it sits here in April of 2026, I wouldn't have believed it. I can't believe how quickly we've made a turnaround in terms of the extraordinary dip in inventory that we've seen, and the pricing really, even though we haven't seen the prices start to go up yet, those are the last things that we notice when this market cycle turns around. And we've really seen pricing be considerably flat for the last 7 or 8 months. It's been remarkably flat. We've had a little bit of fluctuation up and down, but we haven't seen a trend in either direction. And just based on the inventory coming off the market, that really tells me that before too long we're going to start to see that trend in an upward direction, and it's going to be probably 6 months out before we realize that we're in an upward pricing market trend. So I would say if you've been waiting for the bottom of the market's here right now. And as you wait longer and longer, you're just going to have fewer and fewer options as more of this inventory comes off the market. So you know what? If you catch it on the upswing, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The 10-year population projections for the city of Cape Coral is another 100,000 residents by 2040. And we can't have that kind of increase in population without a flourishing real estate market. So if you catch it on the upswing, you're still going to be fine in the long term. I believe in this real estate market long term. I think it's a great investment. Even if you got in 2022 or 2023 at the height of the market, I think we're going to make up that ground rather quickly over the course of the next 10 or 15 years. And long term, we're going to be just fine, and particularly for our waterfront real estate. You know, our waterfront real estate is really still a bargain. You go anywhere else in the state of Florida and look at the kind of Gulf access real estate prices that they have there and compare it to what you can get here in the city of Cape Coral, and there's really no comparison. So Cape Coral has a lot to offer, especially in the Gulf access realm. And so I would just encourage buyers, if you're in a position to buy something within the next 6 months, you'd be in good shape to go ahead and do so. I know it's tough to hear that kind of advice coming from a realtor. It's like, well, you're always telling somebody to buy real estate. But if you've watched my channel for the last 2 or 2.5 years, you know that I don't say this every single month. I certainly haven't. Because I haven't believed it. I truly, honestly believe, I'll put my money where my mouth is. My wife and I are looking for a house right now because we've been waiting on this market cycle to kind of show us signs of turning around, and it's here right now. So my wife and I are going to be buying a new property for ourselves. As our kids are getting bigger, we need a bigger house. So we're in the market just like you might be right now as a buyer. So if you are a buyer in the real estate market, I would love nothing more than to hear from you. So call, text, or email me anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen. I always enjoy working with buyers, especially in this market. And in spite of the market kind of turning around, the inventory coming down a little bit, it's still very much a buyer's market, and you can swing your weight around a little bit still on the properties that are out there, particularly if they've been on the market for a while. If something's priced right and it's just come on the market, you're probably not going to get a big discount on that. And we've seen recently some instances where we've gotten into multiple offer situations within the first few days of the property being on the market. It's kind of a case-by-case basis thing, and that's why you need somebody like me to kind of help you navigate all of the nuances of this real estate market, the flood insurance, the utility extension project, things like that, as well as kind of give you some advice on what to go with and what to offer and things like that. So I'd love nothing more than to hear from you. Call, text, or email me anytime, but that's my advice for buyers. This market cycle is definitely turning around at this point, and if you've been waiting on the pricing to kind of bottom out, we're here. We're here right now, so definitely get a hold of me. Would love to hear from you. All right, so if you're a seller currently in the Cape Coral real estate market, or you're a seller maybe anticipating that you're going to be a seller in the next 6 or so months, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to? Well, I've had absolutely horrible news for sellers for the last, really since I started doing this monthly market report, which was, believe it or not, back in I think late 2023 is when I started doing these. I haven't missed a month since late 2023, so I can't believe I've done as many as I have. But nevertheless, I've never had good news for sellers really in the last 2.5 or so years. But you've got some good news now. At least you got some light at the end of the tunnel. Put it that way. I don't foresee prices start to skyrocket anytime soon, but the pricing, at least from the statistics that we've seen, those charts that I gave you earlier in this report, the pricing has been relatively flat for the last 7 or 8 months. And that's really a good sign compared to the previous, 2 or 3 years when we saw slow but consistent decrease in overall pricing. And, the biggest enemy that you had as a seller certainly last year, was the number of inventory, the amount of inventory that was out there of active available properties. As a seller, you were competing with so many other sellers for a smaller little segment of buyers that it was really, really difficult to be a seller for a while. And it's really become considerably easier. It's not certainly something that's a cakewalk by any means right now, but you've got fewer properties on the market, in many cases 30+% fewer properties on the market now than you did 12 months ago. And so you've got less properties to compete against, and you've got more buyers in the market depending on the category. For instance, really all the categories except the off-water single-family homes are doing considerably better this year than they were last year in terms of the number of sales. If you're a condo seller or you're a Gulf access home seller, you're in a lot better shape right now than you were 12 months ago, and there are a lot more buyers out there for your property right now. You still got to do all the basics, the fundamentals. You know, you got to get your property looking immaculate. That property has that drive up, when that buyer drives up to the property, that drive up has to look perfect. And what's even more important is that first 5-second walk through the front door. When that buyer comes through the front door, if everything doesn't look beautiful, smell beautiful, all of that great stuff, lights are on and everything like that, it's going to be really, really difficult to change that first impression if it's a negative one. So make sure your property is looking spick and span and looks great, smells great, all of that stuff in that first 5-second walk through the front door. And then beyond that, you just still really have to price your property right. The properties that we're getting priced right out of the gate are still selling pretty darn quickly, and we're still getting pretty close to asking price for them. It's these properties where maybe it's had some difficulties and some circumstantial things, like the properties in the utility extension project area that just got hit with $35,000 in assessment. Some stuff like that is a hurdle to overcome, and we've been able to overcome things like that through a variety of different creative methods. But nevertheless, you know, you still got to be pricing that property right, so that you're standing out, because you still have to stand out. Even though our inventory is down 30%, you still got to take that extra effort and make sure that property looks tip-top and is priced right. And price more than anything is what moves the inventory in this particular market. So if you are a seller, or you're going to be a seller in the future, certainly get a hold of me. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to give you kind of a rundown of what the numbers look like on your specific home, because it's all different depending on the location and what the property category you've got there. Call, text, or email me anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen. Certainly love to hear from sellers right now. I've got more pending properties right now than I have active properties in my own personal listing. So we're still doing a pretty good job of moving properties here, especially as we've gotten into the busy season of the spring 2026. But definitely get a hold of me. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your property and tell you how I can help you out. Call, text, or email me anytime. Thanks. Okay, let's wrap this up and put a bow on this real estate market report for April of 2026. If you didn't want to wait through all that hour-plus time of content that I just gave you with the nitty-gritty statistics and everything like that, let me give you the summary. Let me give you the 5-minute version. Our real estate market is making a turnaround right now. We're in the process of making a very slow but very steady and very apparent turnaround. We've been waiting on this market to turn around since late 2022. And we've had a couple of hiccups along the way with some hurricanes and things like that we've had to overcome. But specifically for the sellers right now, you've got some final light. Finally, you got some light at the end of the tunnel. And I would say, just based on the inventory reduction that we've had in the last 12 months, in some categories, 30+% of inventory has come off the market. The number of properties that are available now are 30% less than they were 12 months ago. And that's a really good sign, because we had an inventory issue last year. Certainly 2025, the key word for that whole year was inventory, and especially in the early months, the first 6 months of that year. We had way too many properties on the market. It was putting downward pressure on pricing. And as a result, you know, we did see pricing come down. But the good news is, at least for sellers right now, that pricing's leveled off in the last 6 to 8 months. We've seen a little tick up and down with the median price month to month, but we haven't seen a trend in either direction right now. And with the number of properties that have come off the market in the last 12 months, coupled with most of the property categories, we're selling more properties now than we were 12 months ago. You couple those two things together, and I think that just makes for a quicker market turnaround. And we've been waiting on that for several years as a real estate market, and now it's here. So if you were searching for when this particular market cycle was going to bottom out, when are these prices going to bottom out, for the last 6 to 8 months, that's what we've seen. We've seen it kind of scrape the bottom of here, and before too long, especially as this inventory continues to come off the market, and I fully expect that it will, especially as we get into the summer, more and more of that inventory, we're going to hit some fresh lows on the inventory front as we get into the slower summer months. As that continues to happen, and as we put up a little bit better sale numbers here in the next few months, inevitably we're going to start to see those prices eventually tick back up. I don't know if it's going to be in the next 6 months or if it's going to be in the next 12 months, but barring some unforeseen circumstance with a big economic collapse or something, we're certainly going to inevitably start to see these prices start to rise, and we're probably going to be 6 months behind it once we realize that they are rising. So if you are a buyer in the real estate market, if you've been waiting for that bottom, it's here right now. So you probably should look a little bit sooner than later. If you're a seller in the market, I don't know how much more you're going to get for your property if you wait a year, but I would say if you wait 3 years, you're definitely going to be getting a little bit more for your property than you are right now. So if you do need to sell, just price your property right, and with the number of inventory, the reduction in inventory that we've seen in the last 12 months, these properties are still selling as long as they're priced right. So whether you are a buyer or a seller, certainly get a hold of me. Call, text, or email me anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen. But beyond that, thank you so much for being here. If you did get anything out of this, I know these are longer, drier videos, but do me a favor and hit the like button for me, because it just helps me out, helps this channel out. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Again, I know these are drier, a little more boring videos, but we do some weekly videos here where we're looking at some fun real estate and covering some really important topics. And I promise that you're going to learn a lot and get a lot of really great information out of being a subscriber to this channel. And if I can help you with anything, call, text, or email me anytime. I always love hearing from the folks that watch this channel and watch these videos, whether you're a buyer or seller. So please reach out to me. And I'm about to get wet here, so we might as well wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you on the next video here in just a few days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.